Okay, Chris,
me to start over?
she is not joining the meeting, so I will try to get back to that.
Did the meeting opening live stream, or do we need to do it again?
It's up.
Okay, thanks. All right, so we'll move on to the main part of our agenda. Is that okay, Barb? All right, so today's agenda is a budget presentation. We are in the place of the budget process right now where we're sort of starting to make that transition from early discussions to shape the budget to actually getting to the point where we're starting to work towards decisions about the budget. So of course, like everything, what we talk about today is going to influence what we vote on in June when we vote on the draft preliminary budget. However, there are going to be some earlier decision points around the budget as well that we will address tonight. So in this presentation, there's going to be 3 pause points and there's 3 main sections. The first section is really talking about the revenue gap this year and also tax levy strategy. And we'll have a pause point at the end of that. The decision point associated with that is that in April and May, the board will be making some decisions about debt defeasance that will have an impact on the tax levy. So please, think about questions and get those out there tonight so we can start to make sure people are clear for that vote. We're then going to move into the main part of the conversation, which is going to focus on health insurance, excellence and equity projects, and our stop and do list. The main goal here is that we want to advise Ross about where we want to take things like equity investments in the main budget. One different thing about these equity investments this year is that we have to pay for them either through some of our one-year funding, ESSER 3, or through repurposing existing recurring funds. So we're looking at either non-recurring expenses through ESSER 3 that qualify to be used under ESSER 3 because that federal grant does have limitations as to what we can use it for. Or we're looking at repurposing recurring Fund 10 or other recurring funds in the district to pay for things that might be ongoing. That's a fairly lengthy presentation. We're not going to pause during that presentation, during that section of it until the end. There's a pause slide in there. So please jot down your questions and we'll have a discussion at that point. We're then going to move into a couple of things that we need to make early approval decisions about in a week in March. And those are summer school and some of our equity investments that require early budget approval. So that will be a chance to get clarifications and questions answered before we vote in a week. That's it. I will, before I hand this over to Ross, Dr. Jenkins, did you want to add anything about what we're talking about tonight?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to thank you for the way that you articulated that. That's exactly where we are. That's the point of this meeting tonight. And I think our team worked very well with Ross, and I want to thank him for his leadership, the way that he's worked with you and the team and the rest of the board to have us in the cadence that we are so we can come back in April. Not only our work, but also have some further discussions about some of these projects we're talking about tonight, from our equity, our early learning, some of our textbook decisions that we're making. So thank you very much for that. And we can get started the meeting.
All right, thanks, Dr. Jenkins. Ross is working really hard to get us to the point where we have a budget book released for the board and for the public at the end of April. Ross, I want to thank you for all that work and also for the presentation you're about to give.
Thank you, Chris. And as I get the slides up here, that introduction actually was perfect. It's exactly where we're headed tonight. But let's launch right into it because we do have quite a bit to discuss. So first, we want to ground ourselves in our goals that we discuss each board meeting on how our work impacts not only what we do in the budget, but everything we do. Our first goal, every child is on track to graduate, ready for college, career, and community. The district and every school in it is a place where children, staff, and families thrive. And goal 3, African-American children and youth excel in school. So our budget planning approach, this is the same process we've used for several years now, where we establish our goals and principles as a group. We create revenue forecast, identify the assumptions, our projected enrollment, develop our baseline staffing and compensation strategies, determine how we're funding our district excellence and equity projects, and finalize our healthcare benefit negotiations. So for tonight, we do have a number of things to get through that Chris previewed. A continued discussion about the development of the that's a mistype. It should be 22-23 budget. Our gap closing and levy strategies as a preview for things we need to discuss in the coming months. Confirm our healthcare plan information. review our potential excellence and equity project investments, our stop due list identification priorities, early approvals, and ESSER 3 planning, and finally, our recommendations around summer school. In our budget timeline, we are square in the middle of March, where we are discussing some of the major points of our budget coming together, a brief discussion of our healthcare and benefits overview and direction, our excellence and equity projects again, our strategic areas and focus, early approvals for things like summer school, and some equity and excellence early approval projects that Chris mentioned as well, which will lead us into the April, May, and June timeframes where we put everything together for an initial budget book on April 25th. And we'll be discussing over May and June our final changes to our budgetary plan, continued identification of one-time funding, which seems to be our mode for the last couple of years, and finally approve our preliminary budget for July 1st. Very quickly, we'll go back over our budget goals and guiding principles. That our goals are to distribute equitable use of resources to support students with our highest needs, reduce the number of sections below minimum of the board's class size policy, thus allowing for a more targeted resource allocation, utilize the board's educational equity tool for decision-making outside already approved board policies, invest in a focused set of priorities aimed at multi-year investments to meet persistent equity needs, and provide total compensation to employees to the greatest extent possible given state budget challenges. Our guiding principles are to allocate resources in line with district core values, aimed at greatest impact on our district strategic framework goals, maintain a multi-year long-range perspective on both revenue sources and investments, accelerated academic outcomes, and COVID-19 safety measures. Maximize operational efficiencies and use of taxpayer-approved revenue authority to ensure stability in schools during times of great uncertainty. And finally, build on practices that are showing data-supported promises for the future. I want to start by briefly reviewing the forecast of our revenue that we've been discussing for the past several months. And I've collapsed a lot of the detail we discussed back in January into these data points here. It's important to recognize that our 3-year rolling average, which is the primary source used to identify our revenue authority with the state, is still on a downward trajectory following the last 2 years of enrollment under COVID. Our annual change in revenue limit is tied directly to our operating referendum approval and our non-recurring exemptions for things like hold harmless, which you've heard me talk about quite a bit over the last several months. The underlevy that we made in 21-22 last fall during fall budget approval and repeated declining enrollment expectations is creating just about $6 million to work with for 22-23 operations and budgetary planning. One thing that the board needs to keep being reminded of in this process is that fluctuations in enrollment are going to continue to have significant impacts on the size of what exemptions we are looking at for declining enrollment and hold harmless. Our recurring revenue limit authority will continue to be affected by this impact for the next several years. And again, as a brief overview, with about $6 million to work with, we've identified an initial budget gap of about $2.6 million. And I want to go over tonight some of the strategies we've already put into some of our preliminary planning and how we're going to address that initial gap for some of the goals that the board has set forward in our discussions. Unlike previous years, this is a year in which we are dealing with even more one-time funding, as we've been discussing. But when we talk about our excellence and equity actions for 22-23, it's almost primarily going to be out of one-time funding and plan to use those funds over the next couple of years, given the fact that the state revenue limit and the state budget is not giving us much room to work with. So the first gap strategy I want to discuss tonight in regards to the $2.6 million is some additional debt repayment or defeasance. One that we had talked about last fall, and we're working with our PMA advisors right now to structure for discussion next month, is a defeasance of our outstanding WRS Fund 38 debt. For those that have been in K-12 education in Wisconsin for several years may remember that the Wisconsin Retirement System, or WRS, was established at a point where we had a number of staff already in the system, but that we hadn't been paying for at the time the WRS was established. When that happened, all school districts in Wisconsin were essentially handed an unfunded mandate to go back and fund all of the retirement for those staff that had been working in their districts for many, many years, but had not been paying into that system. So every school district in Wisconsin followed a similar pattern. We created a debt structure, usually about a 30-year structure, that allowed us to pay that debt up front so that people who are just getting into the WRS 30 years ago could start drawing on their benefits at the outset. That meant that we've been paying this off for the last 30 plus years. And we are now, flash forward, at a point where we have 3 years remaining of this debt. The reason this debt is important is that it's within our Fund 38 or non-referendum debt structure. This means that it is inside our revenue limit. So when we talk about our initial gap and 3 years remaining at $9 million, we will be able to free up approximately $3 million of recurring authority to help us with our initial gap discussions for 22-23. This is something I'm recommending very strongly that we do in our discussions next month, as this will be part of our key strategy to closing this gap we've been talking about. Next, I want to preview an additional levy strategy that I'm working on with the board in regards to some concerns we've been talking about our fund balance being higher than we'd like it to be. We have 2 additional debt payments that are callable right now, meaning they can be paid off. Honestly, we don't even need to seek approval at this point to prepay because we can do it within our own authority, but we're going to be bringing it back regardless so the board knows exactly what we're suggesting. There are 2 outstanding debts in our Fund 39 or referendum debt approved fund. So these are not these are not revenue limit considerations. This is a identification of ways to pay down existing debt with funds that we currently have in fund balance to reduce tax levy impact over the next several years, as we do have 2 more large issues for the 2020 referendum coming online the next year and a half. Those 2 debt structures are the Olson facility. We have 4 years remaining at approximately $5.3 million, and the 2015 maintenance referendum for $41 million with 1 year remaining at $2.4 million. The recommendation is to use existing Fund 10 equity to pay this debt off early, again, to kind of draw down our fund balance and show the taxpayers that we're taking money we already have to pay down some long-term debt. And with there, we have our first pause point. Chris, if you'd like to, I can stop sharing for a minute. If we want to start a conversation on any of that.
It would be great if folks can raise their hands. Nikki, I see your hands. Go ahead.
Yes, sorry about that. My mask was slipping. My question, I do this every time. Sorry about that. My question is on the paying down of the debt. When we pay down the debt, is there any way we could use those funds in either future compensation, program compensation, or FTE usage?
Since it would be a one-time payment, I wouldn't recommend that type of discussion because we'd be using one-time funds to prepay a recurring expense.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. And thanks for explaining this and the strategy. Can you tell me if the amount that we would be saving by doing this has already been worked into those budget calculations that comes up with that 2.6?
Correct. The Fund 38 debt we're talking about prepayment is something we've been talking about since last October. That is part of the planning we've been discussing already. Correct.
Okay, so it doesn't close the whole gap there, but this other one brings us closer. Is that?
No, actually, the first one does close the initial gap, the structure from our discussions. The second 2 options, the Fund 39 debt, those are newer options based on some more recent discussions I've had internally about how we can address our fund balance situation. They're not specifically related to a gap closing strategy.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
So Ross, just for clarification, I want to put a couple things out there and just make sure I'm thinking correctly about them. The first one is the Fund 38, $9.04 million. So that's like, if you think about it, we've been paying down $3 million a year on this debt for a while, maybe. If we have $9 million left for 3 years, that's a generalization. But if you think about that like a piece of pie, since it's Pi Day, basically what we're doing is we're saying every year of our pie, we've been giving 3 pieces of pie to pay down this debt. And now we're going to take those 3 pieces of pie and commit them in our regular base budget. So those 3 pieces of pie are spoken for. Like we will not have them next year. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
But they will be able to they're there.
They're there. They'd be incorporated into the operational discussion. That's correct.
They're spoken
And
for.
for some additional context, if it helps, Chris, the reason this debt was part of that pie that you're referencing in the revenue limit is because when that mandate was determined 30 years ago for many districts, unless they chose to go to referendum and ask the taxpayers to take this liability outside the revenue cap, the only choice was to pay it as part of that pie. And many districts did not have the ability to pay down, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars for this WRS debt.
And then the second two debt defeasance strategies you're talking about really just impact the tax levy. Is that right?
That's correct. So the life over the two other issues we're talking about would reduce the Fund 39 tax levy approximately, again, we're doing some modeling on this right now, approximately 300,000 over the next several years as we're trying to structure the second payment of the 2020 referendum. So maybe not considerably a huge impact, but it's certainly an effort to not have such a high debt profile on many issues at once. And we'd be down almost exclusively to the referendum debt itself from 2020.
Well, so the first debt defeasance is about closing our gap, and the second debt defeasance, or the second and third, are really more about trying to control our tax levy.
That's correct.
Are there any other questions at this point? Holly.
We were talking about this debt using revenue closure. Am I misunderstanding that?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear your question, Ellie.
I'm sorry, Ross. We're talking about paying off this debt using the revenue from TID closure.
No, this would be coming out of our existing fund balance. This would not be tied directly to the TID closure.
Okay. Oh, that's my only question.
Okay.
Anything else? All right, well, let's move on.
All right, we'll get everything back up here. All right, next up, I wanted to invite Tracy Carradine, if she's in the peanut gallery, to kind of walk us through our health insurance plans and kind of show where we're headed for next year. Tracy, if you're available.
I am.
All right.
Thank you, Ross. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to kind of go through these numbers with you quickly, but not real quick. So 2021, 2022 health insurance balance increased 3.5%. So not much changed here. $100 for single, $200 for family deductible. For 22, 23, we're going to be locked in at 3%. And so it's $100. So none of that has changed. Next slide, Ross. And you'll see here, this slide kind of gives you an idea of the number of employees that are in each of our plans. So we have two. We have Dean and we have GHC. And so if you look at the graph, you'll see that the crux of our people who take advantage of these are teachers. We have retirees at 10%, and then we have educational assistants at 9%, administration and professionals at 6%, all others 7%. So those are our top ones that use our insurance. And you can see for retirees under 65, Dean is at 105, GHC is at 290. All right, next slide, Ross. This is kind of a speedometer, and this kind of shows where we are as far as current state of utilization. At Dean, we have 89%, GHC 99%, and then our retirees is at under 65 retirees is Dean, 124%, and GHC 161%. And I do like that the carriers put this on the side that for every dollar in premiums, 90 cents goes towards claim and 10 cents goes towards administrative costs. And so Ross, you can go to the next slide. So here we have for 22-23, the renewal and plan design. We are locked in, as you can see, at 3% renewal for GHC, 3% renewal for Dean, as well as renegotiating. So our cap is at 3% for 2022-23, and then 3.5% for 23-24, whereas Dean stayed consistent with the same 3%, 2022-2023, and then 3.5% 23-24. No changes to any of our contributions. So it's $20 copay, $100 single, $200 family, and then 6, 15, and 30, those deal with the differences in your prescription. So 6 is generic and name brand and so forth. So tiered employee premium contribution is averaging at 6%. I think that's it for me, Ross. Is there one more slide?
That's it. Thank you, Tracy.
Yes.
So this is the second of our two pies for Pi Day, but I just wanted to briefly remind everybody when we talk about where our entire budget goes, we're still approximating over 80% of our budget is going to compensation, and that remains true to this day. The smaller pieces you see on this pie are really representative of areas of regular long-term contracts for things like transportation, or open enrollment costs that we've sent other districts, or things like 2X charters or voucher payments are comprising that green pie for purchase services. The vast minority of what is in our operating budget goes to things like supplies and capital equipment. All right, quick, I want to highlight where we are currently sitting on the 22-23 stop do list identification. Right now, the administration is committed to identify a stop do list of $1 million to plan for additional needs at the building level. We're creating this budget where a stop due list of $1 million allows us to increase available supports in our buildings. And what we're going to be doing this in the fashion of is creating additional unallocated resources so that we can more accurately and quickly respond to shifts in enrollment. Many of our enrollment projections the last 2 years have been very volatile, and trying to maintain levels of staffing in all areas has been a challenge to make sure that we don't see significant interruption. We're going to be doing this. Again, I don't have a detailed list to share with you this evening. We're going to be finalizing that list this week, but this will be coming from targeted reductions of district level FTE due to vacancies, some of our assessment priorities that we've been hearing about for the last several months, and non-personnel budgets for several departments. So this leads us to our initial view of where our excellence and equity projects are for the coming year. Off the top, I want to highlight some of our operating initiatives. Some of the things we did during our workbook and allocation process. We accomplished an additional full day 4K expansion, an additional 5 FTE for classroom sections for our elementary sites, some targeted instructions and supports, 6.1 FTE for library media, 0.4 FTE for targeted AVID expansion for West and Memorial, and 4.0 targeted credit recovery at our comprehensive high schools. Additionally, to improve our student staff ratios and in support of mental health of our students, we've added 9.4 FTE of social workers to our buildings. And for planning for the future, as I just indicated, we're going to be adding an additional 10 FTE of unallocated resources coming directly from our stop due list work. Next, I want to highlight for our excellence and equity project work that while most of this is going to be coming out of one-time funds and our ESSER planning, it's important to note that we did hear from our public what priorities and what challenges are facing our students during this pandemic. We are aspiring to identify our excellence and equity projects in alignment with this feedback. I also need to restate that the situation we find ourselves in is this: a lack of state resources, abundance of one-time funding, incorporation of public feedback, and input for our ESSER 3 planning has highlighted 4 major areas of focus for development of these 22-23 projects. In the next couple of slides, I want to highlight some of the larger streams of work that are coming in this list right now. The entirety of this list is quite long, and I will be providing that schedule to the board on or before the discussion for the April budget book. But those areas are mental health supports. At the current moment, we're anticipating about $2.9 million in priorities based on our current list. This includes some, but not all, of the following priorities: behavioral health in schools, or BHS, expansion and expanded pilot, bounce back expansion, motivational interviewing and social emotional health, or SEL mental health, SEL curriculum development, bilingual mental health navigator and mental health BRS, high school seeking safety pilot expansion, and external facilitation for multi-year restorative justice. Next, we have building maintenance, anticipated just over $15 million right now for some HVAC remediation. This is going to be focused on some of the buildings with our greatest needs identified, coming from our facility study from many years ago. We are going to be continuing work with our building services project manager and custodial manager on an LTE supports that we did in our ESSER 2 plan this year. Next, we have our outreach for specific populations, anticipated at about $1.75 million. This includes bilingual recruitment, staffing support for language proficiency, housing navigator contract and or LTE support, unaccompanied youth engagement, multilingual programming and services coordination, multicultural student summit, Dear Diary mentoring program, and additional Black excellence funding. And finally, for supplemental programming, anticipated about $4.8 million for Madison Promise expansion, early college STEM Academy expansion, ACT preparation, additional credit recovery allocation, and the Summer Arts Academy. Next, I want to highlight some other uses of one-time funding because we are only dealing with one-time funding lately. You may remember in July, the governor during his signing statement indicated there was additional coronavirus relief coming to K-12 school districts in Wisconsin, and that we did not have any indication on what this is going to be when we approve the fall budget. We now do. We've received the funding for this coronavirus relief fund at approximately $3.5 million. Since it occurred after the fall budget approval, we have not done any planning around this fund for the current budget year, but we are currently planning for additional engagement opportunities under the Department of Engagement, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion with Carolyn Stanford Taylor. This includes things like multicultural student summits, additional Black excellence funding, and family, student voice, and engagement activities. And finally, I want to highlight the status of our TID funding. We have already discussed in previous budget cycles, last budget cycle, excuse me, that $7.5 million out of the TID 25 closure or Judge Doyle Square was reserved for building projects related to La Follette, Capitol High, Southside Elementary Planning, and Badger Rock. We have a second payment of $7 million we'll be receiving during 22-23. In some of the discussions we've had at the recent operations work group meetings, I'm highlighting for the board now that my recommendation is that the $7 million payment is reserved to address inevitable inflationary costs being recognized in the 2020 referendum schedule. If we're having this much trouble sourcing things like concrete and boilers, some that are increasing as high as 30% in some of our more recent estimates, I have every reason to believe that we're going to need to be meaningful about not only doing some of our value engineering on the referendum itself, but planning where some of these overages will occur. And with that, we have our second pause point. So Chris, I'll hand it back over to you.
Ross, lots to talk about. So go ahead and raise your hands and we'll discuss this. Sabian.
Hey, thank you so much. Yeah, I was wondering if someone from the team could provide a little bit more details on the restorative justice, or I'm sorry, the multi-year restorative justice plan, whether we'll be going out to bid for that, who we're going to be partnering with, and how we're going to target schools.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much. We have not gotten that far in the conversation. However, if the cost is such that we need to go to bid, we certainly will. I think it's most important that we have the opportunity to work with the best and the brightest as we bring together our restorative justice partners, our restorative justice team here in central office, and our school communities in order to form that vision. So we will be very cognizant of those policies and be sure that we're casting a wide net so that all have the chance to participate.
Got it. Thank you. And definitely appreciate that work, and looking forward to learning more as those plans develop. My next question is, I'm wondering if at a later point in time, or if you have it now, the board can receive a list of the targeted capital upgrades, like the HVAC remediation and things like that. And that's my last question.
Yes, we could provide. Okay, is it here? Okay, go ahead, Ross.
I know Mr. Hodo is currently working on identifying that plan right now, and there's 4 buildings that are currently being spec'd out, and those will be shared with the board long before we execute any of the discussions on those plans.
Yeah. Thank you, Ross, for that comment. And Sabian, we'll get this to you in a more comprehensive way. I think we'll do every school so you have a full idea from a budgetary perspective where we're trending at as well.
Thank you so much.
Other questions, comments? Ollie.
Yeah, so I was really fascinated by how we're using one-time funding, especially one-time funding that's earmarked to help us support students and educators make it through the pandemic. We've talked a lot about mental health over the course of the last years, and I'm curious what aspects of our spending in terms of one-time dollars or ESSER funding is really, expected to produce results in terms of supporting the mental health of our students and our educators.
I can start, if that's okay. This proposal that you see tonight represents, I believe, close to $3 million in requests related to mental health. And actually, you will continue to see requests from our team moving forward as we go through this budget process. We really went deep and thought big about mental health needs, and we're incredibly thoughtful about how we can think about surge planning and how we think about sustainability. So this proposal represents the expansion of mental health programming in our elementary and middle schools for now and to ensure sustainability. It addresses elementary students and potential trauma that they've faced through the bounce back school-based intervention for elementary students. This proposal would allow us to be in every single elementary and our special education alternatives. We also know that our student services staff, and I probably should have said this first, and I want to reinforce it, are the front line of mental health in our schools. Our psychologists, our social workers, our counselors, and our nurses are the mental health practitioners that are in our buildings. And so the more that we leverage them and use their skills for what they were trained for, the better outcomes we'll have for kids. This proposal allows us to train them in motivational interviewing, a research and evidence-based intervention. It also allows us to think universally about social emotional learning and ensuring that we are addressing all of the needs of all of our students. The pandemic has been difficult on many folks, and using universal practices and strategies around social emotional learning are critical in addressing the needs of our school communities. We also have had great success with our mental health Navigator and mental health BRS this year, helping expand access to mental health services outside of school. So not only are we able to provide mental health services in school, but when it works for the family, we're actually able to help make a bridge to services. We have a grant for that now and wish to continue funding that for the future. The thing that I want to point out the most is this idea of maybe not the most, but I'll end with this, is our a need to address mental health needs in our high schools. This year, we have a pilot at West High School called Seeking Safety, and we're seeking to expand that to the 4 comprehensive high schools. And this would be a first step in developing overall school-based wellness centers in our high schools, which we will come to you with a proposal regarding likely in April. So I apologize for that long-winded answer, but I want to just be really clear that we have a very intentional approach here, and you're only seeing a small portion of what we're requesting, and you will continue to see requests from us that are not necessarily as early asks as these.
Leah, can I ask kind of a supplanting question? So if folks are wondering, what are the material differences in terms of mental health supports that my kids can expect and families can expect to see in their schools next year that they're not seeing right now, or what will be expanded upon?
That's a great question. And Kristen, please feel free to jump in here if you have things to add. You will see additional clinician time in 3 of our BHS schools. You will see an expansion of bounce back from a subgroup of schools to all elementary schools. You will see the addition of a therapist in 3 of our high schools. You will see the addition of 9.4 FTE for social work that impacts all of our schools. And you will see additional training that our student services staff have not had access to as a comprehensive unit. Next time we meet, there will be additional things that will be new. Much of what you're seeing this evening is a continuation because of the need. The continuation really necessitates that early ask. So some additional new things and things we're really excited to share with you will be coming in the coming months.
And this is my last question for you, Leah. because we're doing an expansion of some things, right? Bounce Back was present in some schools and not all schools. Can you talk a little bit about how Bounce Back worked in the schools that had it and why we're excited to see it move to the rest of our elementary schools?
Great. I'm going to lean on Dr. Getchell for this simply because she has the clinician's mind that can answer that better.
Thank you so much, Dr. Getchell.
Yeah, so one of the things that we really love about Bounce Back is, first of all, it's an evidence-based program. So we know, well, it offers a number of things. Number one, we like the outcome and the intervention, but the other part that we really like about it is that it offers universal screening. So we really have the opportunity with one grade at each of our elementary schools to hear from students and teachers about what's going on with their students and really intentionally check in about symptoms of concern and trauma exposure, and then follow up, whether it be through the Bounce Back intervention or whether it be referral elsewhere. So the other part that I love about Bounce Back is that we've had significant results when we've studied it in the past. Our pilot gave very strong reduction in symptoms across students who were part of the intervention. And lastly, it has really high people who use it love it. So our students and our parents and our staff members say that it's a program that they really like and they're very committed to continuing. And that's one of the things that's really important to me, is that we're building programs that staff and families and students appreciate and are willing to put the effort into continuing. We know that this takes a significant effort to participate and build systems and structures to engage in this kind of universal screening and follow-up. And so when we know our staff are coming back year after year saying, yes, we'll do it again next year, that means a lot to me. And that's part of why we're saying, yes, let's expand. So outcomes for students, it's the right thing to do. It offers expected opportunities each year for our students to get screened. And then we like the outcomes as well. Did that hit where you were thinking, Ali, what you were asking?
That was tremendously helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Ananda and then Nikki.
Yeah, thank you so much, Board Member Caruzzi, and thank you so much, Dr. Esser, and thank you so much, Dr. Gertrude, for this impressive amount of work, and for also presenting to us in with a equity frame throughout the request. Leah, my question is for you mostly. I could, maybe it'll be helpful for me, maybe it'll be helpful for other community members to walk us through what's your vision for mental health interventions? Because I see there's a lot of positions. I'd love to hear, like, what is new positions, what is just repurposing, and then what is coming from central office to district, and what is school staff?
Yes. Do you want me to try to take this, and perhaps this is a question for Dr. Jenkins or Ross, from just the early ask perspective, or do you want me to talk holistically about what you'll see in the coming months?
Oh, I would love for you to share, like, what is the vision? Yeah, what is,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna get started, and then Kristen or Sarah, please do not hesitate to jump in. So when we think about our approach to social emotional learning and mental health, we are really still thinking about this through a public health model, where we look at the traditional triangle, where 80% approximately of our efforts are done at a universal level that are intended to impact students at that place, and kids, the scholars who wouldn't need anything extra. At a tier 2 level, we think about specific interventions and supports for about 15 or so % of our students, and then thinking about the very tippy top of that triangle and really thinking about those personal and intensive mental health supports. So I'll take you to the bottom of the triangle and just really push in here. So to begin, what we're really thinking about is increasing the actual FTE and allocation in our school buildings of our school-based student services staff. We are grossly underallocated in social work and are prioritizing that. As I've shared, our social workers are, and our psychologists, our counselors, and our nurses are the first line of mental health support in our schools. And so the more we can bolster those folks, the better off our students will be. With that being said, we run a risk with ESSER of creating a funding cliff. And so we tried to balance that risk with the incredible needs in our schools. So our first line of defense really truly is putting people in schools to serve students directly. I will reinforce that we have to also, as we're thinking about mental health and the budget and mental health and our approach, really focus on making sure that our student services staff are able to do the work that they are trained to do. They cannot be mental health providers if they are substitutes. So if we have to think about a strategy for a different area of our budget to free them up, we really need to keep that in mind. And I just want to reiterate that to this board. So that's our first line. Next, we think about what are those foundational curricula, foundational skills, foundational practices that need to be in place in order to impact students at the most direct level. This is where our social emotional learning universal work comes in. And this is where we are asking to continue funding to curriculum developers and designers who have already begun this work this year. So that would be a continuance. And then we would be moving into a request to purchase, and you'll see this in the future, universal curriculum for social emotional learning to ensure that what our developers tell us is best practice is able to be implemented and rolled out in our schools. Restorative justice is another universal practice, but it is also a practice that we use when we are thinking about building community, solving classroom problems, et cetera. So it's a strategy that sort of spans that public health continuum. But we see that as a critical strategy in supporting our schools. Last year, we put four restorative justice coaches in our schools and in our high schools. And it is abundantly clear to us that as a district, we are doing pockets of excellent work in restorative justice and supporting schools as requested or as invited, but we lack a comprehensive roadmap to the implementation of restorative justice and a collaborative plan with our partners and a visionary plan as we move forward. So we are looking at both the need to pull people together to do that, but also to frankly have short-term leadership in that area in a project management sense to help us move this work forward. I apologize, this is long-winded, but I'm hoping it's helping. As we think then about our school-based student services staff, they sometimes need to serve students with more intensive needs or perhaps tier 2 needs, if you'd like to refer it that way. This is where we need to really invest in those individuals and train them. So we are investing in motivational interviewing for school-based student services staff and summer professional development for student services teams. As we move up the triangle, we then start to think about mental health interventions and are requesting full funding for Bounce Back, as Dr. Getchow talked about. We're also asking for a recommitment in our FACE Kids cell groups. We lost some community funding there, and these are critical to keep going. It's a 5-agency collaboration where we are able to bring clinicians into our schools as needed for mental health groups. Excitingly, looking to put clinicians directly in our high schools next year. I cannot stress that enough, that we're looking literally to have them in the building next year as we seek to expand that Seeking Safety pilot. That connects to another project that we are proposing. I'll be frank in saying that Wisconsin and MMSD are behind in our development and implementation of school-based wellness centers. We really need to look at some best practice models around us and think about how to ensure that those are in our schools. So the Seeking Safety pilot would be sort of that first step in building a school-based wellness center and a bridge sort of situation as we really build out the system. So we will be coming to you seeking project management support in the development of those as well, including the need to find long-term funding in order to make that happen. So we do have to look to our community partners, to grants, et cetera, and would be working with that. Further, we think about mental health navigation and how we connect students and families to mental health, and a continuation of the work that we're doing there. We also we are proposing a lot of expansion and a lot of rapid expansion to our mental health work. And I have to be realistic about my team's time and the ability to roll those out to schools fast while following HIPAA and FERPA and all of the other partnership rules in the district. So we will be looking for short-term, again, project management support to build that out more quickly. And then lastly, we are thinking about behavioral health in schools as being our major strategy in order to most intensively address mental health needs in our schools. And I'm just going to just share as well, the challenge that we will face even in making this request is finding the therapists to do all of that work. That continues to be a community challenge and something that we are having conversations about with our partners and expanding those conversations to additional partners as well. So there is probably a solid combination of new and continuing and a lot of deepening of work that we have started but haven't had the opportunity to properly tend to in several years.
Well, yeah, yes, thank you. That was really helpful to see sort of the big picture. I just have just one follow-up, two follow-up questions. One is, what is your analysis around closing the gap of the caseload per social worker? Like, are we going to be, after we implement this, of course, granted, we find all the professionals, are we going to be in a better place in regards to social workers, in regards to caseload? And then my second follow-up is, what is this board and our community can expect in regards to improvement for English learner students and students that qualify for students that meet criteria for special education services?
All right, I'll take the first one. I'll start the second one, and I would probably ask Nancy to help us with the third. So our social work allocation right now is 592 to 1. The ratio from the National Association of School Social Workers would be 250 to 1. Adding these 9 positions absolutely helps, but we are still, I can't find it right in my notes in front of me right this second. We are still between 40 and 50 FTE short in social work to meet that FTE ratio recommendation. So we still have an incredibly long way to go to get those numbers up. It is much less grim for psychologists. We are about 9 FTE under, and counselors similarly less grim, but also under. The second question that you had was related to our English learners. There are 3 targeted strategies here to address our needs of our English learners and their families. One is the continuation of the bilingual mental health navigator. And additionally, the use of Care Solace, which is a mental health navigation system, and the continuation of our bilingual BRS. So those are a couple of the things that you can see in the proposal. And Kristen, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, just that we're incredibly excited about adding in the mental health navigator this year, and given her bilingual abilities, like, it's a bonus, and also just incredibly important. I mean, we were hoping to hire 2 mental health navigators this year, and surprisingly and luckily, the one that we were able to hire was bilingual. So So we're really establishing that program and just getting that launch now to where families are starting to see the benefits of that. And then to hire BRS who can focus on mental health and really coming from a health background. It's a different kind of interpretation when you're dealing with health and mental health. And so we're super excited to have her on board as well. And then, like Leah said, Care Solace and other opportunities to make sure that we're getting referrals to the right folks out in the community as well. So thank you for the question. I think that we're in better shape than we've been for a long time. And of course, have continued growth in those areas.
If I could just add too, that we are working and having conversations with the Department of Public Instruction and others within our team here in MMSD about how we continue or maybe better recruit practitioners of color, in particular for this conversation, bilingual counselors, social workers, et cetera. So I just want to also highlight the importance of that. Because again, I will keep going back to this, that our first line of mental health support are the people in our buildings. And the more that we can bolster them and leverage their skills, the better off we'll be.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leah, thank you both. This has been impressive. And thank you for your last comment, Leah, in particular, because that was going to be my recommendation. And I have spoken with Dr. Jenkins about, I know we're going to talk about the grow our own staff, and we already have BRSs that are, providing that mental health support for our families. So what does it look like to provide some sort of, educational sponsorship for them? And I know that many of them want to pursue that, found themselves in this career. So thank you, Leah, for finishing up with that, because that was going to be my recommendation. And Sarah, I saw you turn your camera on. So I don't know.
I'm just so excited. I couldn't not turn my camera on. So that's exactly what we're up to. And however you want to come along, we just found out that there's DPI funding for this. And they're in a 5-year grant cycle, and we're in the middle of year 2. So that gives us ample time to really talk to staff, BRSs, BEAs, really our staff that teaches us every day how we can help them support who they want to become and what roles they want to play in student services. So that's been such a breath of fresh air in the last 2 weeks.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'm sending you an email right now. Thank you. And I'll pass it to you, Board Member Caruzzi.
Thank you. Nikki.
Yes, my question is, I know ESSER is supposed to be for students and teachers, and I'm thrilled at some of the supports with students, but I have some concerns. Namely, we're talking about a summer arts academy. We're talking about the arts in general, and I'm hearing from different high schools because of cuts of allocation. We may have cuts in languages, we may have cuts in FTEs on art and on possible theater. How can we work with that while still, can we use the ESSER money to try and shore up these positions? Because I think our students need them as well as the mental health, because to take away those options where they could actually express themselves, I think would be detrimental to any student's mental health.
Well, I can start it there, Ross, if you want to pick it up there. I appreciate the comment to Board Member Vanderbilt, but we're looking at a plethora of things as we're going through the budgetary process, as we have in the past, and trying to keep those things. Mental health, we all know, social emotion, mental health are at the front of it, and I know that you believe in that.
Very much so.
Board members, but we're also looking at our offerings and what we can do based upon some of those characteristics of enrollment like we have in the past, and looking at how we allocate out, give the allocations out to the schools, but we also keeping our priorities in mind. And as we go through this, we're not done yet. You heard earlier from Ross in terms of the commitment we're making to reducing the $1 million as well from the dole, what we're doing down here to try to continue to support everything closest to the classroom first. So I'll just stop right there. We're going to have more conversation about it and then get more into it. I don't know, Ross, if you want to add something.
And actually, can I ask one other thing really quickly?
Ross, did you want to jump in?
Just to that, I agree with Dr. Jenkins. A lot of what we've been doing so far with the allocation work and the discussion regarding the stop due list and the additional unallocated we're looking to create will be part of some of the ongoing bridging discussions we have each year in regards to teacher contracts, especially as it relates to specials and other areas. So that will all be coming under consideration in the next coming weeks.
May I ask one other? Sure. My other question, actually it's a request. Since I've been on this board, we give the teachers, the principals, their workbooks. Then we return to the board after they've already made preliminary decisions on what to cut. They've had those books since February 11th. Is there a way next year that we could get them at the same time so we can truly work collaboratively?
Well, I tell you, that's a great question. And we've had some discussions about how we can improve this process. This has been the cadence, but we're also looking at how can we become more collaborative and just get the best thinking of everyone from the building level, from the board level, from the administration. And I think as we work through it, we're going to look at next year, how can we improve the process, still being fiscally responsible and
Absolutely.
keeping our priorities intact. And I think that we can just look at this.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you, Ross, for all your work.
Chris?
Thank you. And I guess I would just like to echo what Nikki said. I think she made a really good point, and I think we have talked all along that it is not wise for us to use ESSER 3 funds to create new positions because it would bring us to a fiscal cliff. I think what is possible to do is to maintain the staff that we have that are closest to the students while trying to make the adjustments that we can. I am also concerned about the cuts at the high school level, and I'm just wondering if we can sort of work with the schools, because as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, the way this works is that they go through this allocation process. There are contracts not given, and then if we wait until the end, we would have to whack back and add positions in for teachers who have already left. And so I guess I'd like to better understand how that works and see what is possible with these ESSER funds coming in. And I guess that's a question for Ross, maybe Dr. Jenkins.
Yeah, Ross, if you want to start with it, then I can close it out.
Sure. I mean, we will continue to have ongoing discussions, as I mentioned earlier, around bridging in terms of restoration of positions made at the building level for reductions made. Those are discussions I'm continuing to have with cabinet and with the building chiefs. I don't know if I go far enough to say that we should be using ESSER 3 for restoration of some of those roles, because it would be putting those positions on a cliff again in a year or two from now. But if there are areas we need to re-examine as administration, as a board, we can certainly continue to have that discussion. In regards to the specific surplus process you're referencing, I would need a little bit of assistance from HR on how that plays out. But I know that when teachers are in the surplus process, the no layoff decision is made until we verify that no other position exists in the district that teacher can sustain a contract they're owed.
Correct. That is correct, Ross.
Okay, thank you, Tracy.
Okay, thanks. And I guess I'll just say again that I guess, you know, we are still operating in a pandemic, and we continue to remind ourselves of that. And so even using, you know, ESSER funds in that capacity for one more year would allow us to get a better handle on our enrollment perhaps, and to know where we're at going forward. So I appreciate us continuing to have these discussions going forward in the next couple months. I guess I have a couple of questions on, I'm just trying to wrap my head around how the early approvals that you're looking for are fitting in with the other pieces. There's a lot of different proposals attached, and I'm wondering if we might be able to, I mean, there's one for the health services funding proposal, and that looks like that list comes off of ESSER 2 funding. And then there's ones that are, I mean, it says, you know, some of them are new, some of them are already staffed. And then there's other proposals, the behavioral health ones that Dr. Esser already talked about. Is there a way to like sort of capture this in a different way, like in a summary document or something, so that it would be easier to sort of keep track of the moving pieces?
So yes, I do have a schedule that I'm maintaining of all the requests. And as we're thinking about our ESSER plan for next year, one thing that we need to start thinking about is ESSER as a whole. We've had a total of 4 awards from the original plan back in March of 2020 to the ESSER 3 plan that we're trying to put together right now. I'm incorporating a lot of the planning around what's currently existing on ESSER 2 and what's planning for ESSER 3 as one pot of money to work with. So that is something I just want to make sure everyone's aware of. But in terms of the early approvals, that is coming up later in the presentation. We haven't gotten there yet, but I do want to highlight, you're correct, Chris, all the sheets that were provided in the board packet for tonight and how those relate to some of the things we're going to be hopefully discussing or voting on next week.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. I'll wait on the early approval questions then. And my other question was on building maintenance. That is a big chunk that is written in there. And a lot of that says it's for HVAC. I don't know how it's broken down in there, but I'm just wondering if we have gone back to that facilities assessment that was done probably 5 to 7 years ago. And it gave us a periodic table of the schools where they were rated from A to F. I know there's a lot more needs for upgrading facilities beyond just HVAC. So I'm wondering if we can take a look at that also while we're trying to decide the ESSER funding.
Correct. Actually, Chris, we are using that exact study to preview some of the areas where there's the most remediation needed. I am working with Mr. Hodo to identify the buildings that have the greatest need. And depending on how far we go in the ESSER 3 plan, or I should start like ESSER plan for some of this remediation work, HVAC is applicable. And while it would be great if we could take, say, $30,000 and fix the HVAC at every school, that's not going to necessarily work. So there's definitely need to be some targeted discussions about what buildings can get that attention within the grant timeframe.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you. And then my last question is, can we just get a little more detail? And I guess this is a question for Dr. Jenkins. There's 24.9 FTE that are being added, that are being repurposed from other places. Can we get a little bit of understanding of how that shifting works, where the repurposing comes from, and how, the investment shifts? I just think it's really, really important that we're making that investment in social workers and the full day 4K and the other priorities that we're making. Just hoping to get a better understanding of where the shifting is coming from.
Yeah, definitely. We could definitely do that for you.
Okay, thank you. That's it. No more questions. Thank you.
I'm not seeing other hands, so I will jump in with my questions. So when we started off this presentation, we talked about stability in schools being one of the guiding principles for this budget. And I want to chime in on the feedback we've been hearing from high schools, both through email and then through our board members just reaching out to high schools to find out what's going on, because not all of our high schools have people who are advocating through email. And it does sound like we are, at least at some of our high schools, we are losing electives, we are losing core courses, or at least core course sections that we used to teach. And I know that enrollment is up and down, and at the same time, things are feeling very, very unstable because of the loss of program offerings or AP classes, or having to reduce sections of core courses that we offer. So Ross, I'm wondering at this point, what is our total unallocated pool in the budget? It's got to be over 20, right?
Correct. So based on the stop due list consideration we're putting forward in this presentation tonight, unallocated will be over 22, almost 23, based on my mental math.
Thanks. So I'm wondering if we could be proactive and we'll try to get a handle on the course offering changes that are possibly leading to instability in high schools. And one piece of that instability is the dependence on teachers teaching overloads to potentially deal with larger sections where enrollment loss doesn't reduce those section numbers, because teaching overloads adds to the stress of our staff. And we know that our staff are overstressed. So I would advocate using some of that unallocated pool to either restore programs that we might lose in the arts or in world languages or in core courses or in AP that we don't want to lose, because right now we just don't want to lose that stability. And also, be thoughtful about the stress that's on our teachers if we're depending on overloads to teach classes. So if the administration could both, give us some kind of an indication of where we're at with programs and class sizes in our high schools, and where using that unallocated pool might make a difference. And then I think waiting till the April operations work group meeting till the end of April, regular meeting to talk about this is almost too late, because our high schools are scheduling now. Like, I would say administration should, hopefully move forward with a plan to maybe address some of these issues in the high schools as soon as possible. That would be my feeling. I don't know if folks want to respond to that, but.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, we are working with our schools at this time. I was on the phone with two of the principals today and talking about some of their needs and how we need to look at it. And we just want to make sure that, as I continue to say, we're going to serve all of our students. We have our priorities there. This is normal. Ross pretty much alluded to it earlier when he was speaking, as we want to go through some of our even repurposing to be able to support our schools. But I definitely hear what you're asking, if we can move it earlier. But right now we're in that discussion, and as soon as we can, we will do that if need be. But I also want to make it really clear that how we go about issuing FTEs to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible to all of our schools and all of our citizens at the same time. And those courses are generated based upon student interest. We've had some courses we haven't talked about that actually went up in sections because there was student interest in German, right? And we have seen some things happening with the arts that we say that's our priority. So we're having some different conversations. So your question is right in alignment with some of our thinking, the recalibration we're having to do with some of our schools. So we'll get back as soon as we know. We can come back earlier with it. I know you can't act on it until later, but we'll come back with it.
Yeah, and please, if we can start to use some of those unallocated positions sooner rather than later to create stability, let's do that. Let's not wait till summer or fall. We could actually make a difference now. I'll come back to the rest of my questions later, because Ollie, it looks like you want to add to this.
So I just want to say I completely support the strategy that you're speaking to, and the desire of the board to, I think maybe you spoke to it earlier, to really, stabilize our schools, to maintain the staff that we have, to continue to maintain high quality programs that our students are excited about and involved in. And so I greatly appreciate both of you for speaking to that. And
I also want to ensure that we're maintaining equity of programming across all four of our high schools. It's, our two of our high schools are smaller than the other two, Easton and Wallet, and they're also two of our schools with, the most representation of students in this district. And I want to make sure that everybody has access to a diverse and rich array of arts and other electives in the district. So.
6 high schools.
6 high schools, sorry. I've talked to the 4 comprehensive high schools, but yes, we need to make sure we're offering electives at the other 2 as well.
I forgot something. Can I add? I was at West this week for a voter registration drive. Thank you, Nama, for inviting me. I really appreciate and wanted to give her a shout out on that. But when I was there, I had talked to 3 students with disabilities on programs they were afraid were getting cut. One who gave me the permission to state that she said, I'm dyslexic. That Latin's the best thing I ever took because I could see sentence structure. I could understand how it works. So now I can use it in English to be able to figure out what the sentences mean instead of what the word looks like. And I found that incredibly important, and hadn't thought of it until now. But I think that's an area where it is an equity issue. We don't always address that issue. And frankly, I'd never thought of it in that manner, which is why I wanted to raise it for that reason. And thank you, Chair, for indulging me on that.
I just had a couple of other comments. One was on the HVAC. I'm really happy to see us using a chunk of ESSER funding to make investments in HVAC in our schools. One of the many things COVID has taught us is that ventilation and heating and cooling in our schools is not just about mechanicals, it's about health. And I'm glad to see us making investments in bringing those systems up to date. I think it would be really helpful to get a full plan for how we're going to handle HVAC updates across the district, because my understanding is we're using ESSER for some of them, and we might be using building maintenance fund for some of them. So it'd be nice to get just like an overall plan for which schools we're going to try to do HVAC upgrades in and how we're going to fund them. So that we're looking at the whole comprehensive plan. I also, Leah, I truly appreciate the holistic summary you gave us of how we're approaching mental health. I fully support the investment of ESSER dollars into the work that you have proposed. It's desperately needed. Even though it sounds like we are doing a lot, and even though I totally understand the limitations in terms of the number of therapists and psychologists available to work in our schools, I still wonder if it's enough. Just given the mental health struggles and crises that so many of our students have faced in the past year. And a specific piece of it that I'm wondering about is alcohol and drug abuse and addiction. Is some of what we're doing with mental health going to specifically address the needs of students who are perhaps struggling with addiction at this point in time? And how are we going to serve them?
Chris, Dr. Getcha, do you want me to take this systemically or do you want to take it clinically?
I think that there's a number of layers here, and I can start with
Okay,
one.
go ahead.
I think the Seeking Safety pilot that we're doing at West right now specifically is a short-term program that at the moment we're pairing with UW Health, which used to be the old ADAP program. So their clinicians are coming from very much a place of being able to support drug and alcohol assessments and addiction. But that's a very small number of students and one small target. So I definitely think that it's a larger systematic kind of program approach that we need to take. And Leah, I'll let you step in there about where we're headed with some of that.
Yeah, this is really part of building our systemic multi-tiered system of support and ensuring that our schools have those tools and resources. As we are working now, we're really addressing those on what is the function of the behavior sort of approach, where we are really thinking about what the students' unmet needs are and providing them with those additional supports. We are not proposing at this time the addition of AOD resources or staff, but that is something that I will just simply say that we'll take back to the team for a conversation. And you may potentially see something around that, but you will for sure see information about our approach.
I appreciate that, because it's an issue in our school, and as a board, I feel the need to address it. Strengthening community partnerships where there's more expertise in that area. So finally, I just want to express my thanks for the good work on the healthcare plan and the fact that we're not seeing any design changes this year. That's reassuring for stability of our staff. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask one more question to build off of Chris's question about more students needing more support. And I'm wondering, at the classroom level, it seems like our teachers may need some more supports in PD about how to provide mental health and help for students at a more universal level. Do we have plans for adding in specific PD for staff in our schools? All staff, not just the clinicians or the social workers, counselors, but for the regular classroom teacher and the other support staff.
Yeah, I'll take this. I'll start, and then I'll ask Sarah Kenevi to jump in if there's anything to add. We truly have a robust training program and systems that are available to support our staff using developmental designs, for example, nonviolent crisis intervention as another example. We have found this year that time is the biggest barrier to providing that training. It's not necessarily the resources or the curriculum. It really is the time being the barrier. We are hopeful as this pandemic shifts to endemic and we are able to reorient ourselves a bit, that we're able to push in on that more for next school year. Sarah, do you have anything you want to add?
I'll just add a little specificity. That's the frame, is that we are used to having time together in community to talk about what what the impact is on the classroom and what our strategies are. School-based leaders and student service teams are phenomenal at that. We intend to like reinvigorate that work in the summer at the Summer Institute for Student Services. And then we intend to carry some of that content into welcome back days so that schools can have that very content at the school level and then make application to the classroom. So it's a huge component of who we'll be when we come back together in the fall. So I appreciate you lifting it.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Ross, let's move on.
All right, let me get my screen back up here. I almost hit the leave button. Real quick, before I move on, I want to highlight that the next couple of slides go specifically to some of the approval items we're going to be discussing next week. First, we're going to start off with the summer school budgets as we have them right now, and then move on to the early approvals, which were supplied with the materials this evening. What you're looking at here is the draft budget for the summer semester program for this summer. And one thing that's likely going to stand out is the difference in the budget for fiscal 22 versus fiscal 23. And that is because last year when we had this discussion, we were discussing using ESSER dollars specifically for summer semester and an increase in programming and students that we were anticipating because we were trying to get ahead of the learning loss situation that we know is a main focus of the ESSER awards already. But in the budget for 2023, that budget is separated out. And what you're seeing here is a return to the annual budget process for summer school. And accompanied with this, there is a change in what we did last year. Last year, because we were doing kind of a surge strategy for summer semester, we had given out estimates for a $40 an hour for instructional staff. This year, we are returning to our regular summer school budget programming, so that $40 an hour is being flagged here as not a sustainable practice. In years past, we've used $25 an hour as our extended employment rate for summer semester. And at this point, we are acknowledging that there is a need for an inflationary adjustment of those costs going back to an operational budget. And we're currently recommending an hourly rate of $28 an hour for all instructional staff as part of summer semester. So the budget reduction you're seeing here is a direct reflection of the removal of the ESSER funding strategy, which we are now going to be talking about on the next slide for the Summer Arts Academy structure, and the removal of other one-time funds related to Title III that we did for initial PD for some of our letters training last summer. And on this slide is a quick overview and vision of the plan for the Summer Arts Academy. And I would like to welcome anyone from the instructional side who'd like to speak a little bit more to this. But we're currently planning an instructional strategy around the Summer Arts Academy of about $1.3 million. And the plan is to use ESSER dollars for this program as a complement to the existing summer semester program that'll be occurring in the afternoons. And I know that there are others here who might be able to help with this discussion. I don't know if Cindy Green is available to speak to this briefly.
Sure, thanks, Ross. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all. I'm happy to just highlight a few things that we have secured for our really exciting Summer Arts Academy. Peter is not with us tonight. I know Kaylee Jackson is on here as well if she wants to chime in. We're also coming back to you at an instruction work group soon to provide a much more detailed update as well. But a few of the items that this funding is going to go for is a partnership that we are working on with the Madison Children's Museum for all of our K-4 MSCR sites. We're really excited about this. 10 sites are going to be able to have opportunities to take students over to the Madison Children's Arts Museum a few times throughout the summer. They're going to be collaborating on a mural art project. They're going to be doing a variety of other arts enrichment opportunities. Students are going to be able to receive a free Madison Children's Museum membership for every student and their family for the following school year. So we're really excited about that. One of the other exciting opportunities that we have secured is through Madison Youth Arts Center, the My Arts Center, which is that beautiful new building that many of us have seen off of East Wash. And it is with the Black Star Drumline. So Joey Banks, who is the director, students are going to be able to participate in a drumline and a percussion ensemble. They're gonna be working on team building and really building culture and collaboration throughout this process. We've also been working with the Overture as well, and we're doing kind of kids on the rotunda on the road. So if any of you are familiar with the Overture's rotunda that they offer a lot of times Saturday mornings, we're doing a road show with that where they are going to be coming to the MSCR sites across the district, both the east side and west side, those 10 sites for our K-4 students with some traveling artists, etc. So that's just a few of the highlights of what is happening through this super exciting Summer Arts Academy.
All right, thank you for that, Cindy. All right, after the summer school slides here, we're going to briefly go through what we started to talk about earlier. And this is a list of the early approvals that we're going to be seeking for consideration on March 22nd. And many of these items are, which include the dollar amounts on this slide, were previewed in the earlier discussion around the overall ESSER schedule, but I do want to restate them here. The sheets for these projects were supplied in the board packet information. The form that was used across the entire district to receive input from specific leaders, especially you heard a lot from Leah Esser tonight, or Dr. Esser tonight, about some of these programs, but specifically these mental health supports are going to be up for review next week. The BHS expansion, the expansion pilot, the bounce back expansion, the contract reproportioning for BHS, the restorative justice program manager, the mental health groups for Journey Heart and Face Kids, school-based wellness center planners, and high school seeking safety pilot expansion. I forgot to mention the reason we're seeking early approval for these items. They're going to be part of the overall ESSER schedule that we're going to be discussing next month, but they're coming forward now so that we can get ahead of the hiring timeframes and the contracts we need to prepare to make sure these services are available at the beginning of the fiscal year on July 1st. Or July 1st, yes, thank you. All right, and then next is for supplemental programming, the Summer Arts Academy, which we just discussed, about $1.3 million. The additional credit recovery ask of 4.5 FTE, which would be additional services to our high schools. And Madison Promise expansion, we've been working with Dr. McCrae on making sure that our virtual learning opportunities for next year are ready to handle the capacity while we find out what the right size is for that program over the next couple of years. Additionally, there are some other items for project management that we're highlighting here for early approval. The largest one, of course, is the health services plan for the FTE, contact tracing and testing that we've been doing this year. We are planning to continue for next year. The current plan cost, which is itemized in all those sheets, is about $2.2 million. Additionally, we are acknowledging for the board at this time that there is need for specific project management and specific grants accountant needs for the ESSER award itself. As part of these federal awards, we do have the ability to apply indirect cost to some of these items to make sure that we have someone fully committed for the life of these grants on these projects. The grants accountant will help with some of the compliance needs and tracking of ongoing. Our current grants accountant is amazing, but this award that we're doing right now is a full-time job onto itself, and I can't continue to ask them to do this and their regular job full-time and keep them here. The ESSER 3 project manager will be reporting to the state and federal programming office, helping with specific grant management and project management specifically to make sure that the dollars we're saying we're going to spend will get used appropriately and in the correct time frame. So with that, I want to quickly highlight our next steps on where we're headed. Based on everything we heard tonight, we hope to bring back some of the early approval items we just went through for March 22nd for discussion and hopeful approval so that we can get moving for July 1st on some of these items. We'll be continuing to work through the March and April on final budget balancing needs and our required allowances that are still being identified as our contracts are coming back. Further conversations if needed on any equity projects we discussed tonight. The debt resolutions we previewed, are hoping to bring back on April 25th at the regular meeting for consideration of the Fund 38 debt defeasance for the gap closing strategy, and additionally the Fund 39 strategies for additional tax relief over the next couple of years. And we are going to be releasing a draft preliminary budget book on April 25th as well. For May and June, we'll start to solicit community feedback on the budget book itself. The debt resolutions for the second bond issue for the 2020 referendum will be coming back on May 23rd, so we can have those funds available for the critical construction timeframe this summer, and continue to make adjustments where needed in preparation for the June 27th board preliminary vote on the budget. And with that, that's the end of the deck for tonight. So if you have any additional questions, please let me know.
So much, Ross. Are there any final questions or questions about the early approvals and summer school? Ollie.
Yeah, so I just want to ask about the capacity for students to attend the Arts Academy. So I want to say how many students will benefit, I guess, from our investment in this arts programming, and what will that mean in terms of our students' ability to receive academic credit or participating?
So I can go ahead and start that. Ali, I can't give you an exact number tonight. We have 3 different strands that we are working on, and I'll be happy to get you more details on that. And I see Kaylee just jumped on. We'll have the opportunities that are going to exist through MSCR. So any students that are taking the afternoon MSCR opportunities and the arts programming there. We are also offering programming for middle school and high school. And for high school, yes, there will be credit opportunities for the students that are engaging in that. And then we're also working on some pop-up opportunities that will exist throughout the community as well. So we've got these 3 buckets happening as we finalize all of our partners and our community organizations that are going to be working with us. We will have better numbers. I think the one thing that we're trying to be conservative or cautionary in is to ensure we can pull up some very good things with actual staffing as well. Staffing is, we know, just a challenge across the board. So once we feel really confident about those, like the ones I named today, we'll be able to give you more numbers. But I'm going to flip it to Kaylee to see if she wants to just add to anything I just stated.
Yeah, thanks for that, Cindy. And Ali, thank you for the question. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. So yeah, I echo everything that Cindy said. One of the things that we're really doing right now is really trying to center our community partners and all of the great arts that we know that we have in the community right now. So as soon as we're shoring up those contracts, we'll be able to get to you with some more specific numbers on our capacity. But we really want to be sure that we are centering, obviously, our Black and Brown students and our Black and Brown community partners. So as we're finishing that up, we'll be able to provide you with those numbers, and we can do that through weekly board updates as well.
Maria, I want to follow up, and I so appreciate what you're speaking to in terms of who will have access to this programming and how we are, making sure this opportunity is available to students who have historically been left out of opportunities within the arts and artistic expression. There are 2 areas of the arts where we have had a really hard time engaging students K through 12, and that is dance and theater. And so can you talk a little bit about how this will expand opportunities for students who are interested in exploring dance and students who are interested in exploring theater?
Yes, great question. So I believe Cindy spoke a little bit before about us working with the Overture Center and being sure that we are partnering with them for every elementary school to be able to have access to the kids in the rotunda on the road. Which will obviously support there, as well as the Broadway Junior show with our Overture Musical Theater. So we're partnering with those 2 in particular. We're also partnering with our Black Star Drumline. So we are working specifically and seeking out partnerships in those areas, as we know that is something that we've struggled to do in the past. And so we'll be continuing to find local partners for both theater and dance.
The one other thing about theater that I'll mention that I think is really important, one of the things we're doing is more of the staging and the behind the scenes theater work. I know that very often we think about theater only in those that are interested in the acting piece and forget about how much goes into the staging, the lighting, like all of that. So we are working on that for our secondary students as well, because we know that's a critically important piece that I think sometimes actually gets overlooked.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I think, these opportunities aren't just about like making sure that there is a play that's happening. It's making sure that that play is inclusive. And so if you're doing a musical and it's Sound of Music, it sends a very clear message about who is supposed to audition versus if you're doing a play in Spanish versus if you're doing a play that is, by August Wilson. So I really hope that we're taking into consideration the nuance that needs to go into these opportunities in order to make them sincerely accessible to our students. That's it for me.
Thank you. Sabian, followed by Maya.
Thank you so much. I'm wondering if someone can speak to how summer school programming can connect students with internships.
I would be happy to talk about that. And then I don't know if Nicole is on here. She can chime in as well. But we are really excited. We've been partnering with the city, specifically Hugh Wing and his work that does a lot of youth employment. And so we are creating many opportunities for students that are paid internships for this summer. We have a couple big buckets that we've been working on. We've been looking at IT, we've been looking at healthcare, we've been looking at STEM specifically, and there's a few other areas, but those are kind of where we have, TDS, we've been working with TDS. So we have a host of paid internship opportunities that we're really excited about because we know many of our students are wage earners in the summer. And so we want them to get paid, get credit, and learn something that's connected potentially back to their coursework. So that's one. In addition to that, we will have kind of general experiential learning opportunities that'll be run through our summer school structure and supported by work-based coordinators and checking in with kids as well for that. But I would say the larger piece is definitely around these paid internships that we're working directly with the city on. So hopefully that answers your question, Savion.
Absolutely.
I would say the one thing, so I'll just say one more thing, sorry. I think the one challenge that we have and others have is UW Health, for example, has hundreds of opportunities for us, but due to COVID, due to staffing shortages, they're also trying to grapple with what they can offer for our young people and which of those also have to be in a virtual setting, which is a great experience, but not the same experience as students will get hands-on. So that is a little bit of the world that we're still in right now in terms of being able to offer all of these opportunities face to face. Sorry about that. I just didn't want to forget to mention that piece.
No, thank you so much. That was very helpful.
Great, thanks. Maya, followed by Chris.
Yeah, I just had a similar question and comment that Ali had. I just want to one up it. I think a lot of times we are partnering with some of the community partners and they're not necessarily translating into some of the communities that we're trying to make sure that we serve. And so I know historically my daughter has been part of some of these programs and has been the only or one of the only Black children in them. And so I would definitely challenge you all to really try to focus on other opportunities that are outside of our normal partners that we typically partner with, or that usually have some of those programs just readily available. And I'm thinking of a couple other programs or other things that may be able to help with that, but also too, even with the internships, there are programs that are teaching children how to be barbers. There are schools that are teaching children how to do hair and things like that. So I think investing in culturally specific programming, I think also helps with getting children into some of the activities and internships that I guess meet them where they're at. I think that that's a big focus to make sure we do if we want to really be equitable in that case. So that's just my quick comments.
Thanks, Maya. Chris?
Thank you. I'm taking a look at the early approvals request under the mental health supports and then some of the other categories there. And I'm just wondering, one of the questions I have is school-based wellness center planner and high school seeking safety pilot expansion seem to be related to each other. And I'm wondering, since we've already done a pilot on it, can we get some information on how that pilot has worked? And I just think this is probably a more general request for everything that is an expansion of something we're already doing. I think it's really important that we take a look at how those programs are already working and how they're serving students before we go ahead and expand them. And so I'm wondering if you could just speak to that one at the high school wellness center seeking safety pilot expansion. Another question, I guess, related to that is the Restorative Justice Program Manager. I know there has been some incredible work happening in the high schools with our new Restorative Justice coaches who have been added at the high school level and our Restorative Justice staff at the district level. So to be, a quick update on how that's going, because I think they've been doing some great work and how this would fit into that and support that. Yeah, I guess I'll take a pause there and see if Dr. Esser can explain that.
Yeah, I'll actually have Dr. Getchell, if you don't mind, take the first question and I can take the second.
Yeah, so the school-based wellness center has not been piloted. That is going to be that we're creating the pilot for that expanded school health and mental health access. That's part of the ask. How the Seeking Safety pilot has gone is that we've been at West High School this year. It was a very specific pilot related to a county funded project that was at both Verona and at West. So in some ways, it gave us a chance to bring a clinician into our high schools and have a chance to see what that looks like. And it also is only, is not something that we're looking to exactly replicate. It was just our first step of looking at how that looks. We meet with UW Health and West on a regular basis because we know it takes a lot of time and attention to build the capacity and build a program. And I would not say that we're at the point where we have evaluation data for you, other than I did check in with West just this week, and they said they felt that it was the exact right kind of program that we need at the high schools. That really took away barriers around insurance and access for our students who aren't, have a lot of barriers in seeking care elsewhere. So just from a consumer standpoint, we're getting a lot of good feedback, but we don't, and we know that we're at the point now where we're getting students connected to care. That took a while to get up and going to build that program. But all indications are that it's going exactly the way we'd want it to. We also, just as a reminder, have a lot of data from BHS. And so while this is different, it's at the high school level, we know a lot about implementing mental health programs in schools. And we have a lot of great data that you all have seen over the years from BHS. So again, I don't want to overstretch, but we definitely feel confident about a lot of this work and how to move it forward.
Great, thanks. I appreciate that. And I do appreciate that this is going in at the high school level. I think it's really necessary and I think it's a great investment. And if we can just make sure we build the evaluation piece so you can come back to us, because if we have to move this off of ESSER funding at some point and figure out how to fund this, it's going to be really important to show the impact that it's had for our students. And
if you remember, our BHS evaluation is extremely thorough, and so we've got a great basis to build on. And we also know that nationally, the school-based wellness centers have extremely good data, and we can build on that partnership as well about those national organizations about how we want to build on that model from if we look at the whole health and mental health model with the school-based wellness center. So yes, I totally agree. I am very motivated to find a way to fund this long-term. So
great, thank you.
As far as your restorative justice program manager question is concerned, as we have been implementing restorative justice for well over 10 years. And throughout the district, there are pockets of excellence that happen every day as we do restorative work. We're seeing practices in our buildings. We're seeing universal practices. We're seeing practices to address harm. But we're not seeing a comprehensive, and we have not provided a comprehensive and cohesive roadmap that will help schools to intentionally implement restorative justice systems and address mindset, bring in partners, and really just have a level of intentionality and focus that we have been lacking for quite some time. When we approached restorative justice to begin with, often it was as an approach to wrongdoing, and we're really trying to flip the script and think about a way of being, and really are just looking to have that additional project management support to help bring together the stakeholders for the visioning and implementation planning.
Great, thank you. I think that's really important for continuing to move this work forward. So appreciate that investment there. My last question is around the expansion of the Madison Promise Academy. I am really wondering if we can, before we approve this, get some sort of sense on how this is working for students and family this year. I think that's really important as it's a 10 FTE additional investment in this. And I feel like before we go forward with that, we do have to understand how it has worked this year for students and their families. I see Dr. McCrae jumping on. Hi.
Coming off mute, I was going to say, and I am always glad to be able to talk about this venture as we are moving into this. We are learning so much this academic year as we are starting with our online school program, for Madison Promise. One of the things that we recognize is that we had every great intention of developing an online program for students who truly wanted to be online. However, what we recognize is that the majority of the students that we received this year were truly students who just did not want to return to school because of the pandemic. So what we found at the end of this semester was we lost a lot of students because of a lack of engagement. What we are seeking to do now is truly have another year where we can really get it right. We are the perfect example of what it's like to build a plane while you are driving or flying. We have landed the plane a couple of times to kind of regroup, and now we are truly ready to take this on for next year. This early access so that we are able to have the staffing in place to support this program now so that we can do a lot of our work over the course of the summer. As you are aware, last year, one of the things that we did was we began to pilot and really advertise for the online program during the summer and when we were coming back into school. So we're trying to get ahead of that so that we can make sure one of the benefits that we did over the second semester was we met with individual students. And so we want to be able to do that now. We are finding that the students that we've onboarded our second semester are a very different caliber from the students from the first semester. And so again, we've learned a lot. And so we're hoping that this opportunity will allow us to really have a good year.
Hey, thanks for explaining that. And if there's any way to get us a short summary of numbers of students served and how that has switched from semester to semester, some of the outcomes that you've seen with the students as far as engagement. And I guess it looks to me, just reading over the brief summary there, that it's an expansion down to 4th and 5th grade. And I mean, as we're going, I would suggest before we start expanding to other grade levels, let's really get a handle on making sure we're solid at the grade levels we already have before we expand. But that's just, I guess, my suggestion. without any expertise, just throw that out there. I don't know.
Well, here's the thing, right? So one of the reasons why we are looking at the lower levels is because we recognize I've had an awesome team this semester and this year. I could not do this work without the group of teachers who've stepped up to really help me do the work. I just want to be really clear. The group of teachers have really allowed us to be able to be so flexible to say, this isn't working, let's do this, let's switch, and let's be able to do that. We feel very confident in being able to say, let's rethink our grade levels, so that one of the reasons why we're doing that is because we recognize that the elementary students really, there are a lot of our families who are saying that my student simply learns better, whether it was a pandemic or not, and we would like an option for that. And so we also recognize that our biggest goal right now is literacy. And we recognize that some students in the lower levels, being in the classroom is just going to support them better versus trying to learn those literacy things and be online. We also recognize that when you are online, you have to be a student who have a lot of those skill sets already learned. And so that's one of the reasons why we're starting at the 4th grade. We're also, Chris, thinking about one of the lessons learned, and we recognize, well, at the question of why 10th grade, stopping at 10th grade, because we need an opportunity to build a course sequence for our students so we can give them multiple options in the courses that we want them to be able to take. We don't want them just to have to take this class just because it's the only one. So by doing this 4th through 10th grade, we're now able to build a better course sequence for our high schoolers that will give them options just as if they were in a traditional setting. We've learned so much over these 2 semesters. And so this will really allow us next year when we come here, we'll be able to really say, we are ready to really expand this by really thinking about just the number of students. And because these are just some of the really good things that we learned.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Ananda?
Thank you so much, Board Member Caruzzi. I almost forgot about my question. Okay, so now I got it. This is not necessarily a question, but every time we have talked about summer school in the past, I keep thinking about all the things that we take it for granted in regards to summer school. We take it for granted that families understand how to navigate summer school. We take it for granted that families know when they should be enrolling in summer school, and that if they wait until June to think about summer schools, they're likely all the amazing opportunities are gone. Things that we take for granted that summer school is a cross-cultural sort of space that every family, that's in Madison understands the importance, the need, the how to navigate, and if how much of that can contribute to the overall well-being and enrichment of our students. And I would love for us to think about as a next step to how do we support our families around, and even understanding, but in particular our new families or elementary school families and families that just moved to Madison. What does it mean to have a summer school programming, and how can they benefit from it? I know as an immigrant and single parent, I had no idea, and I definitely failed miserably the first year until I realized that I needed to hire a part-time LTE person to manage a full-on spreadsheet for the entire summer. It's ridiculous. The second thing that I would say is I would love for part of that that summer programming to be connecting to preschool programs across the state. The UW system offer amazing things. And I think that a lot of our students would really greatly benefit from even not just academic pre-college programs, but enrichment pre-college program. And in particular, I'm looking at Ali, like in the areas of arts, arts and science. And I think that, it does take an additional support. It does take an adult to sort of make those connections, to refer students to those programs, and to be on a lookout for timelines and due dates and whatnot. So that's my recommendation. Sorry for my joke.
Norma, we haven't heard from you, and I know we've talked about a ton of things tonight, but I'm wondering if anything that's come up, either you want to respond to, or if there's ways that aligns with the work of Student Senate that you want to highlight.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for giving me some space to talk. I had a few questions, but I think they got answered. I had a few questions about the restorative justice and the mental health, but I think they've all been questions that have been answered, so I don't want to repeat myself. But thank you for this presentation. I think I've learned a lot and kind of how systems of budget really work, because I haven't been really exposed to this at all. So it's interesting to see where all the money comes from and where it's allocated within my school system and our school system. So I think that's all I've had. I don't have any questions, but thank you again for giving me the space to ask.
Thanks, Norma. Thanks for being here. I've got a few questions. I'll start with my questions about Madison Promise and Early College STEM Academy. Madison Promise, my primary question is that last year we approved funding for an online program in response to a pandemic. We knew we had large numbers of families who would not be comfortable sending their kids back to school in person, and that we had to have an online program to respond to their needs. We are now shifting into an environment where this is less about COVID and more about parents looking for an alternative for their children. And I am wondering, with that change in purpose, has this ceased to become an online program, and is it becoming an online school? And the reason I'm asking that is there are legal things we have to do with DPI and with our own board policies that are different if Madison Promise is becoming an online school. And I don't want it, I would feel uncomfortable if we were starting an online school, but calling it an online program to avoid those things that we have to do if we're starting an online school. Like if we're starting an online school, I think we need to use our policy, follow DPI rules and regulations, and do it right. So I'm just wondering, as Madison Promise goes through this transition of just responding to COVID to being an alternative for families who want an alternative, when do we make that call that this is actually an online school?
So, Chris, thank you for that. And Dr. Jinks, I'll take the first stab of this. I want to be very clear, and I thank you for the question. We are an online program. We are not, I have already communicated with DPI stating we are not making this a online school charter. That's just not what we're seeking to do. What we are seeking to do is to create a program just for our students so that they have an option if they want to learn online. And I just want to be very clear, that is the direction that Dr. Jenkins has given to me. And that is one that I feel will be the best thing for our students at this time.
Dr. Jenkins, go ahead.
Just to add to that, thank you so much, Dr. McCray. We want our students in the online program to have all the benefits of participating in their regular schools. So that, and I shouldn't say regular, in their schools. So that they can have that socialization piece as well. But this is a vehicle in which they become the agents of their learning in a way. And it's just wonderful for a lot of people.
No, I agree with that. And even if we're not starting an online school, according to DPI definitions, MMSD, we do have a policy around magnet programs. And this to me is starting to feel like a magnet program. And I think we need to dig into that policy and create the information for the board so that we're creating this program following our policy and with that level of thought and analysis behind it. Nikki, if you can just hang on, I've got a couple more questions, but I will
sure. I would love to have that conversation. So we're doing this in collaboration. I think this is an opportunity for our students, and everything starts with our policies. We need to make sure that we're in alignment with our policy. That way, if we're in alignment with our policies, it impacts our practice and it impacts all the people that we're trying to serve in our community, all of our scholars, our parents, like that. So yes, most definitely, let's have that conversation.
My second question is about early college STEM Academy, which expansion, which I know is not an early budget approval, so it's less urgent. But I would like to just put out there that one of the reasons we see declining enrollment at our high schools is because we have students going to early college STEM Academy. And on one hand, early college STEM Academy is an amazing opportunity that I would not want to take away from students who are looking for getting some early college credit in the sciences and technology. And on the other hand, as we expand that program, we have to acknowledge that for the students who are still in our other high schools, we are reducing enrollment, and it gets harder to provide the diverse offerings of courses that we pride ourselves in being able to offer as our enrollment declines. So I think we have to be really conscious of the trade-offs between expanding early college STEM Academy with ESSER money, knowing that when that short-term money dries up, we're going to have to use enrollment changes to fund early college STEM Academy.
Hey, Chris, could I clarify here real quick? Is that, oh, Sally, sorry, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so I just want to say, I think anytime we talk about like navigating options and enrollment, we can't presume that were that option not available, students would be in our high schools, right? Like if a student doesn't have their needs met in the school and they go to early STEM Academy, like that keeps them as part of our district. And let's say we didn't offer that, we could be driving students out of our district to a district that does offer that. So I guess I would say I'd hate to pit our STEM Academy against our comprehensive high schools in terms of in terms of how we navigate it. And I hope that makes sense.
It does make sense, and I appreciate that. And I also know in past conversations about funding early college STEM Academy, we have talked about, well, we would use saved money from loss of enrollment in high schools to cover the cost of early college STEM Academy as the grants dry up. So Cindy, I'd like you to clarify, because I'm worried we might be getting ourselves in the same position where we're using short-term dollars to do an expansion that we will eventually have to cover with permanent funding. And what that means in terms of the kids who are not in early college STEM Academy and the offerings they have.
Yeah, so I want to just clarify, we're not requesting an expansion of the early college STEM Academy. We are staying stable at 200 students right now. I think an expansion of that is a different conversation for another day because our students are thriving over there. What we are doing is we're asking for the last round of $250,000 to get us to a stabilized budget for the early college STEM Academy. So if you remember, we put a graph together for the board a few times that shows an equity ask, $250,000 over a number of years to get us to the stable point of the $1.3 million, so that when the grant and the one that we got from Ascendium, we were able to have a stabilized budget. So this is the last year of that $250,000 ask. And it is for the 200 students, not for an additional, not for additive for students.
All right, that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Sure.
My third question, this is just a technical question. Some of these early approvals are on ESSER 3 and we don't actually have ESSER 3 money yet. How does that work?
So the early approvals on the list are not, you're correct. We don't have access to the money. We're not planning on spending any of that money until July 1st. What we're trying to do with the early approvals is to get the contract work and any hiring plans ready so that we can have those positions and contracts effective July 1st, so that we can have them ready for the start of school.
Thank you. And my last question is just, are we seeing a decrease in the number of people applying to teach summer school with the decrease in pay?
Good evening. I'll answer that, Chris. What I can say right now is I have weekly or bi-weekly meetings with our Human Resources Department. And we are right now, we are seeing a really strong number of internal candidates who are applying, and we are beginning to send out offers this week. So I would say right now we are still on track, and we will continue to monitor as we look at our positions, look at our enrollment, and just keep an eye on it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That's really helpful. Nikki.
Just wanted to add to your magnet school point. I was on the board during the end part of the magnet school. with Wright Middle School. It was a very difficult thing to do for the reason of we did it too late. So I think you're absolutely right. If we think it's falling into Magna territory, I think we need to look at it because we didn't with Wright and ended up with a lot of very confused parents, a lot of very confused teachers, and a lot of very confused board members. So just wanted to fill that in. I know I'm old, so thought I should throw it in for posterity.
I think we're all right there, right? We're gonna look at it together.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea to go back to that policy. All right, are there any other comments? If not, before we close out, is Zoe still in the room?
Yes.
All right, so we had a public appearance, which didn't quite come together before we started. So we're going to do our public appearance at the end of the meeting today. So.
Hi, am I good to go?
We're good to go.
Okay, perfect. Hi, my name is Zoe Halstead. Today I'll be talking about the recent termination of Madison West High's Latin program. Everyone at West Latin is very saddened and angry at the decision of Latin being cut, and so I'm here to represent their interests. Latin program has a lot of students that are being negatively affected by this decision, so please consider our points. Our teacher, who is known to you as Miss Bayouth or Magristra in Latin, has made West a welcoming place for students. She's an asset to West, and we do not want to lose this amazing and inspirational teacher. She truly cares about her students, their mental health, and their achievements. This is seen through the community she has created. Latin has been a class at West since 1935. That is 87 years. It has been a fixture of culture at West and creates a tight-knit community for those who share the love of classics. Our Latin classes are diverse in ability, heritage, and culture, and we house a lot of students that you would not fit into traditional foreign language programs. Some students in the Latin program have English as their second language and have voiced that Latin has helped them to perfect their English skills. And one of my really close friends who could not make it here today is a student in Latin. She has dyslexia, which makes reading and spelling difficult for her. Latin classes helped her reading comprehension skills tremendously and made her more of a confident reader. So I ask you this. If Latin is cut, what will you do for students who need 4 years of the same language? Are you planning for rising sophomores, juniors, seniors to transfer into different language classes, consequently ruining their chances into getting to more competitive universities? Are you planning on having all students take Latin classes at the UW next year, which would cost the district so much more money than keeping the original Latin program and making it extremely inequitable for students to continue this course who do not have 2 hours in the day to commute to college and privatized transportation? How are you going to fit all the Latin students into language classes that are extremely overwhelmed by students? And why are you cutting a teacher who has a passion for language learning and students while our district already is going through a teacher shortage crisis? There has been tremendous support to our cause. We have sent out a petition that has gathered 1,450 signatures as of today. Students, teachers, family members, community members, academics have shared their support, and I really urge you to read our petition, as in the public section, there are so many who have shared their concerns and support. So I ask you as a student and representative of Latin to please consider our future in education. Thank you.
Zoe.
Thank you.
Great, well, that brings us to the end of tonight's agenda. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Ollie, can we have 5 minutes before we jump into the next meeting, or do you want to just move right ahead?
We'll start the next meeting at 7:10.
Thank you.